With us right now, Charlene Li. Charlene, you are an author, a speaker, New York Times bestselling author, speaker, and you're a founder and senior fellow at Altimeter. But Charlene, you are found on the web at charleneli.com. That's L-I. Your newest book, The Disruption Mindset, Why Some Organizations Transform While Others Fail. Charlene, thank you for joining us.
So good to be here.
Well, Charlene, I kind of talked about you a little bit, but I'd love to hear it from you. Tell me about the great work that you do in the world.
Well, I try to write research and publish it as books, also as reports. I do a live stream on LinkedIn every single week on Tuesdays, fingers crossed, at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern time. And I really talk about how I can help leaders thrive with disruption, because we oftentimes think of disruption as something to be avoiding. And I believe we should all be pursuing it, and to the best way and ability that we can. We need more leaders who are capable of creating exponential disruptive change.
Yeah. So, obviously, there's disruptions that are outside of our control, but you're suggesting that, hey, if you have an opportunity to go break something, go for it.
Right. Well, and it's not just break something. Disruptions aren't actually the problem. It's actually growth. And if you think about it, it's not about looking for a disruption that's going to drive growth. Because a lot of people come to me and say, so what's the latest, newest technology we can use and create to create this growth? I'm like, you already have everything you need. You're standing in the way of your own growth, because the minute you start growing, you get to that very edge. And then you go, whoa, that's going to be really hard. We're going to have to change a lot of things. I don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. So you back away from that. What I found in my research, though, is that disruptive organizations go right up to that very edge. They push it constantly. And they're like the Energizer Bunny. They can go on and on and on, disrupt themselves and their environment, their industries, without any drop off in energy. And so I was curious, how do they do this? How do they consistently disrupt themselves when everyone else is just fatigued, exhausted from even just thinking about it?
Yeah. Well, you are saying disruptive organizations as opposed to maybe like a disruptive product or service or disruptive market forces, for example. But how do we facilitate how do we encourage disruption within organizations?
Well, I think it comes back to what organizations do so well, leaders do so well, and that is they set a strategy. They have a vision for what the future looks like. I can't think of a single leader who says, well, everything's perfectly fine, exactly the way it is. We love the status quo. We're going to stay exactly where we are today. That's just madness, because we know that our customers are constantly changing. And if we don't acknowledge that, then we're putting blinders on. Instead of being blinded by our current profitable customers, we need to be going after these fairly unprofitable, cranky, ugly future customers that may not look that attractive, but that's what the opportunities are. Yeah. So my superpower is I help leaders and their organizations see the future, not the future that I see, but the future that they can see. And oftentimes it's just removing the old beliefs, the old ways of doing things, so that they can actually see these future customers and chase after them.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you have worked with the biggest of the big, as in terms of your clients, IBM, 3M, Oracle, Philips, Adobe, et cetera, et cetera. Your front page is basically a who's who of the top countries, top companies in the country right now. So obviously they appreciate the great work that you're doing. But where did you come from, and how did you get and develop what you've developed? What's your backstory, your hero origin story?
Yeah, I grew up Asian American, the daughter of immigrants from China, in Detroit. You look at me, you go like, that girl isn't from Detroit. Well, that makes no sense, right? So I grew up as an outsider. I was always the oddball person, oftentimes the only person of color in my working class Detroit neighborhood. And I got used to always being a bit of a contrarian just by simply walking into the room. And so when I started working in business, I really looked for the opportunities, these different point of views, creating synthesis. And I came out of business school, Harvard Business School in 1993, and went to work in newspapers of all places.
Wow.
And the reason why is because I could see that the internet was coming and that was going to create a lot of disruption, a lot of change. And I believed in the role of journalism in our societies. And I went, well, the business of newspapers was something I was fascinated by. And I wanted to be at the front row of that disruption. So I landed in Silicon Valley in 1993, the year the World Wide Web was invented, and started learning and putting advertising, marketing, content, media marketing on the internet right at the very beginning. So that decision, counterintuitive decision early in my career, this risk that I took to go to newspapers of all things, because that was where the change and the disruption was going to happen. And I've made my entire career about change, chasing after these things. Internet advertising in 1999. I did all the .com advertising sizing that drove the .com boom when I was at Forrester. I started looking at social media and technologies in 2002 and wrote one of the first books about that in 2008. I've been looking at digital transformation and now all these crazy technologies like quantum computing that's way out there on the edge. And the one thing I've learned throughout all of this is that it's never about the technology. It is always about the people.
Wow.
And Josh, you focus on relationships, right? Yeah. This is the key to influence. And when I think about the ways that you create change and disruption, you could have the most beautiful strategy, the most wonderful technologies. If you're not able to harness and inspire people to create the change, the vision that you see, nothing will happen.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So I didn't realize we were each Michiganders.
Oh, really?
I was, from West Michigan, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids area, and it's and then from there, so you made your way to Harvard. Again, if and you kind of illustrated this just a little bit. What was it in your early background that your formative years? I don't know if again, there were any other elements of your upbringing, your culture, or being in Michigan, the Midwest, or whatever, that flavored your kind of your mindset and what was really interesting to you at the time.
Well, as you know from Michigan, Michigan is perennially rated as one of the most nice, polite people in the world.
Yeah.
And there was something ingrained between that, and I also grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian education world with my community, Seventh-day Adventist. I'm a fourth generation Seventh-day Adventist, even though I'm not practicing anymore. Mm-hmm. And what I think that did is that there was a strong component of service and of optimism that your individual efforts can make a difference in the world.
Wow.
And that really shapes the way I think about organizations. And I encourage leaders to answer these three questions. And especially if their employees, every single one of their employees can answer these three questions. Who is our future customer? What is our strategy to be able to meet that future customer? To meet their needs? And third, and most importantly, what is my role in making sure that that strategy gets executed with excellence? Not perfection, but with excellence. And I do this when I begin a client relationship or before I do a speech or something. I try to walk around and see as many people as I can, just randomly, like, so tell me about your business. Who's your customer, your future customer, all those questions. And there are very, very few organizations where every single employee can tell me that. And when I do find that, it's a gem, because you know that the leaders have made this huge effort to make sure that every single employee has agency. This beautiful idea that every single person can be an owner, feels ownership, not only in their job, but in the strategy and the outcomes of the business. That's really difficult to do. That takes a very different mindset, one that's focused on relationships. And if you think about what that means for our customer relationships, it's also the same way. The best influencers, the people who have the thought leadership out there, the people who are able to gather people to them, are the ones where you're inspiring people, where you're pulling people in because of what you're giving, more so than, the like get rich quick schemes or one single answer. Relationships are built over time and shared experiences and trust. And that's really what lasts, as you have talked about quite frequently too.
Yeah. Charlene, one thing that you talk about is moving past change fatigue to the growth edge. So first off, what's change fatigue? And secondly, where's the growth edge? What does
Yes,
that mean?
a great question. Change fatigue is, I hear this from organizations all the time. They're like, I was working in one group and they're like, I know we really want to be disruptive, go into change, but we're just so tired. We're constantly doing change. And we just recently did this big change. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. So we have some experience in doing this. So how long ago was this? Oh, that was 2 years ago. We're still recovering. And when your change cycles are running in years and not months or weeks or days, the people who are able to have resilience, they have that stamina to do change well. You're going to get beat by them. Business and organizations leadership, it's a marathon. So how do you pace yourself? Where are the times when you sprint forward, and then, as any athlete knows, you also have to build a recovery time? So change fatigue is when we don't do this in a systematic way, when we don't think about how we're going to actually manage change intentionally and strategically, and it just happens to us. But I also think the edge is very important, and we all experienced the edge back in March. We did in 3 or 5 days what we thought would have taken 3 or 5 or even more years. And now we've come back into this comfort zone where things aren't so crazy anymore. And we're sitting right back square in that comfort zone rather than thinking about how do we stay at that edge. So I encourage people to know where that edge is, define it, and go right up to the very edge of that. Look over that precipice and go, whoa, that's too scary over there. But don't retreat all the way back to home base. Just take one step back. You're on safe ground. Nothing is going to collapse around you, but stay at that edge. Because when you move out of your comfort zone and you're at that edge, that's where the magic happens.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the ones that are, it's kind of like the first movers, right? The first people that are like, look, that looks scary. It's like, for example, like we look at like, how, a global pandemic, really was disruptive in a negative way, but it also created a lot of opportunities. And, I was just so heartened by the number of business owners that stepped forward and said, you know what, I can help. I can tweak what we're doing, and we can help with this new problem that's coming about. This is a great example of like, okay, wasn't planning. I didn't have global pandemic in my threat box, my SWOT analysis, but well, there it is. It's being able to do that nimbleness. And Charlene, that's gotta be Herculean, to imagine a large organization like a 3M being able to adapt, change, and be nimble, in response to, oh my gosh, all of a sudden consumers just hate this, or, because something trended on social media, right? And some of these things are just like, what, are you serious? But okay, here we are.
But what I found in my research is that these organizations that are good at dealing with disruptions day in, day out, they look at all this. I call it a flux culture that they have. They have built-in structures and policies and procedures that anticipate and expect change. They expect that things don't go well, and they're geared towards that. Versus most organizations are geared for removing all the extraneous stuff, removing any externalities, removing any chance that things aren't going to hit 100%. That's a very fragile organization. And these anti-fragile organizations, the more bumps they get, the stronger they get. And so what you saw when the pandemic hit, they just accelerated. Because like, hey, we're wired for this. We know how to do this. Whereas everybody else is figuring like, where's the Zoom button, right? How do we do this? They know how to do this. They know how to work with hybrid teams. They've been doing it for years. They have been pushing each other's envelopes. They just kind of went, yeah, we'll just keep going. And I'm a big believer that disruption creates opportunities for change. And you should be looking for them. And you have two choices. You can either duck and hide and hope the disruption doesn't hit you, or you can jump up as high as you can to grab all these pieces that have been tossed up into the air and put them down together again in the way that you see them. And the numbers bear this out. Business formation in the US is up 46% over the previous year. If I look at just May of 2021 compared to May of 2020, it is up 69%. So that may be a matter of people like, I don't have a job anymore, so I've got to go out and drive Uber. But the actual business formation of corporations hiring people is up 70%. So we leaders and entrepreneurs aren't idiots. We won't go and do something unless we see an opportunity. And what happened with the pandemic is that everything changed. It's true the old businesses were no longer viable, but new opportunities were being created. And these amazing entrepreneurs are out there looking for and seeking out and building businesses to meet these new needs. That's why 3M, which actually is a very, very nimble company, is able to do things like this. Adobe did a huge digital transformation back in 2013, 2014, committed to doing a big, huge pivot of their business to go into the cloud away from packaged software. Nobody was pushing them to do this. And they did it to themselves, and they committed to losing money as a publicly traded company for 2 years. And the charts
that takes a lot of guts.
It took a lot of guts. I mean, literally the CFO went to Wall Street and goes, I got great news. We're going to lose money for 2 years. Isn't this fantastic? And so I talked to the CFO. I'm like, how on earth do you have the chutzpah to go and say something like that? He goes, because we utterly believed in this new customer that didn't exist. We did tons of research. We did modeling. He went out and as a CFO could talk just like the CMO, understood what those customer needs were and could convey that to Wall Street. So every quarter when their numbers went down, the stock price went up. Never seen anything like that. And that's true belief. I mean, they're a publicly traded company. They're not, TikTok or Google. I think they were Adobe. They were like old non-tech company. One of the boldest, biggest transformations I've ever seen.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So Charlene Li, your website, charleneli.com. Someone that's listening to us and they're like, okay, I want more. Give me more. All right. What do they click on? Where do they go? What do they do?
They can come into my site. Everything is on there. You can follow me on LinkedIn. That's probably the place where I update things the most. I would love to hear from you. I do research, and the only way I could do research is to learn from the challenges and the successes that people like you have. So I encourage you, connect with me, share with me your stories. I love hearing about what the challenges are, and if I can help, would love to be able to do that. Join me on my live streams, and I will soon have a podcast and also some courses coming out this fall too as well. So lots of different ways to engage, and I look forward to it.
Very cool. Charlene Li, thank you so much for joining us. Again, your website, charleneli.com. That's L-I. Li spelling like with the L-I. Charlene, thank you. This has been fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much.